We have an exciting update for the sold-out San Marcos Until He Comes conference. This is totally cool. We want as many people as possible to hear all of the important messages that will be presented by, get this, our 7 world-class speakers. So we have a special offer. Listen, if you've already registered for the San Marcos live stream, be sure to check your email for a coupon code that will give you special pricing also for the Texas conference live stream. And if you haven't registered for San Marcos live stream, make sure to do so this week. You'll also receive the special pricing to watch San Marcos and the upcoming Texas conference. Just visit hopeforourtimes.com to register. Make sure to invite your family and friends to also register. And remember, you don't even have to be home during the actual conference. You have a full 30 days to be able to watch whenever you want. Listen, you're going to be super blessed. God bless you guys. Hey, welcome everybody to our Monday live program. Pretty exciting. We're live on the app, on the website, Roku, Facebook, and YouTube, all at the same time. And listen, I have a real special guest on today that I rarely get the opportunity to have him on. So please welcome Bill Koenig from watch.org. Bill, it's wonderful to have you on again. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you're exceptionally busy, so for me, this is a big deal having you on.
Well, thanks, Tom. It's always fun. It's always a pleasure. It's always interesting. So thank you.
No, this will be great. So we have people watching from South Sudan, from Colombia, from New Zealand, from Australia, Canada, and obviously United States, over in the UK too. Some of those different hours, I don't know how they're able to stay up at 2 in the morning or whatever time it is, but they are. So it's really cool having everybody on. Hey, Bill, real quick, last time you were on, it's just absolutely fantastic, but I want to make sure, get everybody to know a little bit more about you for anybody who hasn't caught you online before. I'm sure most people already know who you are. But your ministry is watch.org, and a little bit of your history, your DC history and other things that obviously put you in the know.
Well, thanks, Tom. About 25, 26 years ago, I was on the President's Council at Dallas Seminary and had a great interest in Bible prophecy. And when the internet started to develop, I thought, wow, what a great venue to start posting world news that's biblically relevant with a focus on Israel, the Middle East. And so in 1996, we started doing that, posting news every day of the year on world news that's biblically relevant, some domestic focus, but mostly prophetic Israel, Middle East. And then right after George W. Bush became president in 2000, the Lord opened up a door for me to be able to move to Washington, D.C., move our internet news service. and operated out of the White House for 20 years. I was there for both Bush terms, both Obama terms, and the Trump term, and as a White House correspondent for our news organization. So I had White House press credentials and also press credentials in Israel for my many trips that I took there. So when I would go to Israel, I would cover the major events that are taking place, the Netanyahu government for most of that time. And I just love prophecy like you do, Tom. And we're living the most important, exciting days in history. So right after Biden was inaugurated, moved back to Texas. So I've been back in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half. So it's great to be back in Texas. Probably the only good news about Biden being in the White House. And but at the same time, wow, what a day for guys like us on these amazingly important times.
Oh, these are truly amazing days. And one of the things, Bill, that you have written about over the years, and you have a book on it, is certain decisions that have been made by the White House, and then weather events that have happened or certain climatic things that have taken place, which I've always found interesting as you have connected those different dots, primarily dealing with Jerusalem and the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. Just amazing when you start breaking those things down, which we're going to look at some of the things going on with Israel here in a minute. But I've always found that so fascinating as we think of God's covenant that he has with Israel.
It never fails, Tom. I've been following this all the way since the perfect storm in the early 1990s, and especially really started following in late 90s, early 2000, and up to this present day. My Eye to Eye that was updated in 2017 has 126 record-setting catastrophes that happened at the time the United States White House was applying pressure on Israel to divide their land, or eventually George W. Bush birthed the idea of an Arab state in Judea and Samaria and parts of East Jerusalem. And, you know, the Abrahamic covenant, it's an everlasting covenant. God gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob the land from the Euphrates River to the great river in Egypt. This is the land. Israel's never fully occupied that, but you don't touch that land. You don't attempt to divide that land or parcel that land. And even our well-meaning presidents that would like to see peace in Israel and the Middle East happen, it has not happened, and there's been enormous record-setting catastrophes. And I noticed the greater the pressure on Israel to comply, the greater the corresponding catastrophes. And I've even seen two major hurricanes move back to the ocean when the President Bush in 2005 and Trump in 2010, when Barack Obama said he would not pressure Israel to divide their land, with all these Arab leaders and Netanyahu at the White House, and went back to the ocean. So, you know, those that have attempted to create a state in the Judea and Samaria have all had consequences, including Donald Trump, who did more for Israel than all our presidents combined.
It's really fascinating, especially when we look at now, the United States has some serious internal problems. And at the same time, the pressure from the Biden administration, whether it be outward pressure or covert manipulation, seems to be rather prevalent in the things that are going on in Israel today. There's threats against those who are believers over in Israel, Messianic Jews. There's the problems with the judicial reform. There's the threats of Iran that are always there, of Hezbollah that's always there, and dividing the land of Jerusalem, that threat. Saudi Arabia, you had mentioned before we came on about what's going on with the Palestinians. So, Bill, I'm just going to let you take the first one and then go with whatever of those you want to, and we're going to build up from there.
Well, I think what's happening that's so interesting. Trump had so much favor. He did so many things, moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, got out of the Iran deal, said Israel has the sovereign rights to the Golan Heights, closed the Palestinian office in D.C., quit funding their UNRWA program. He did so many things. But through his effort of his son-in-law, Kushner, they established a Peace to Prosperity plan that was delivered on January 28, 2020. And I wrote a commentary, Life in America before January 28th, and also the favor that was on Trump to life after January 28th, the COVID crisis breaking out the day of the plan and then worsening over the next couple of months to the whole international community that all had established their plan for the land. But what happened is Trump came up with a plan. It was going to call for 70 to 80% of the Judea and Samaria and eventually to be given to the Palestinians. And I recently talked to one of the former chief of staff, won't mention his name right now. Why'd you guys do this? Why did you come up with a plan? He said, well, we never thought the Palestinians would take the plan anyhow. I said, well, unfortunately, it continued the narrative, the false narrative of two states. And also it was different. Trump actually had a map that was put on Twitter for his 78 million followers at that time that got up to 88 million. For the international community to see a map that superimposed the boundaries of Israel. And then in February 23, 24 of 2020, he sent over 3 members of a mapping team to meet with 3 Israeli mappers to work on the meets and boundaries of the future Palestinian state. And life changed dramatically. And then throughout the summer, Abraham Accords, we had record-setting hurricanes that happened at the time they were working on the plan. When they back off or have a couple-week lull, everything calm. As soon as they started working again on the Abraham Accords, Kushner and his team, that happened again. So, I just continued to follow those situations. We've had so I'm talking about the Middle East and talking about those countries. Every Middle East leader that's attempted to come against the land of Israel has had an untimely death or a tragic death. And even in Soleimani, the leader of Iran, their military leader, taken out during the Trump term. His plan was eventually to wipe out that Zion country. He and Khamenei were real close. Baghdadi of ISIS, he was developing an army that was going to eventually free Jerusalem. Saddam Hussein was developing a Jerusalem army. So a lot of these leaders have suffered the consequences as well in those countries participating in the plan and continue to speak on the international level, especially at the UN and international forums about Israel. It's time for Israel to divide their land, and the consequences have fallen on them as well. But most of the United States, because we've been the point man in the peace process.
Yeah, and you look at it, just going back to Trump and then Kushner, Abraham Accords. Abraham Accords are still out there. They're still being talked about. But when you look at it, there's so many other things so many other factors that have come into play. And a lot of it, I think, Bill, is because of Iran and the threats of Iran. Then you have Saudi Arabia, who is started to be friends with Israel and now seems to be definitely backing off of being friends with the United States. But Saudi Arabia, at one point, really seemed to be putting pressure against the Palestinian narrative. But now that is all reversing too, isn't it?
What's interesting, Tom, is the Abraham Accords, members of the Trump administration thought it'd be clever to call it the Abraham Accords because these are descendants of Abraham.
Yeah.
It's interesting, on the signing date, September 15, 2020, when it was being signed at the White House, this massive hurricane named Sally was about ready to come ashore. So you had the signing ceremonies, and in the corner, this massive hurricane, Sally. And then the next day, Kushner was on international TV talking about their plan, the Abraham Accords, and Sally had just come ashore. One of my readers contacted me. He says, the Hebrew derivative of Sally is Sarah. So in other words, Hurricane Sarah was slamming into the southern Gulf Coast as the Accords was being signed. The Lord put in my heart, this is an emphasis that the land is for Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants, Ishmael. So, even the preciseness of that kind of response. And the other problem, there were some people that are so excited about the Abraham Accords. And the thing with the Abraham Accords, the main thing is it continued the two-state narrative. The United Nations, all the Arab leaders that were involved with the signing or at the UN a couple weeks after the Accords were signing, all said we would have never, ever done this deal, normalization of Israel, had not stopped the annexation of those Jewish communities. In other words, Israel was talking about extended sovereignty to 134 Jewish communities, which is the right thing to do on the Abrahamic land. And though that agreement of the accord stopped that, Tom. So I think the entire Middle East is facing this effect right now.
Wow. There's so many people that were saying, no, the Abraham Accords are really good. There's still some Israelis that I talk to every now and then that still think it's a good idea. But you and many of my other friends and myself said, there's something fishy about this whole thing. And I was talking on one of my trips to Israel, just with one of my friends in the military, who said, look, this thing divides the land. This is what it does. And he showed me a picture of a road that was part of the plan. He goes, some say this road's always been here, but this is part of the Abraham Accords. And then one of the things that's always bothered me about it, which you alluded to already, is we have the Abrahamic covenant, that is God's covenant. And then to take that name, it's always like, well, this is a very strange thing to do. So we know that Israel is, and especially Jerusalem's the bullseye when it comes down to Bible prophecy. As we look at the beginning of everything, it began in Jerusalem. How everything's going to end, it's going to end in Jerusalem. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is just outside of Jerusalem. He was crucified in Jerusalem. You look at all of it, it's going to culminate in Jerusalem. So we have the judicial reform issues that are taking place right now. We have the civil unrest from that. We have protests that are increasing against proselytizing over in Israel. So all these different dynamics taking place.
Tom, hold 1 second. My alarm just went off in my house. This is the first.
Oh boy.
So,
okay. Go take care of that, Bill. So folks, listen, we're going to take questions here in just a second. So get ready to send your questions in actually a couple more minutes. We'll do that. But I had a question last night that came into me regarding travel to Israel with the unrest that's taking place over in Israel right now. What are we going to do about? Is it still wise to go there? Listen, you don't go to the places where there's literal trouble. Like you don't go down to Gaza. I mean, I might go there myself. Sometimes I'm an idiot, but I'm not going to take a tour group there. When you see the unrest that we watch on TV in the Western world, really what we have, a lot of that is propaganda, and which is from the U.S., Western media, anything to put Israel in a bad eye. And by the way, just a reminder also, we have the live stream for San Marcos that's available. We have this really cool offer I'll tell you about by the time we get to the end for a live stream for San Marcos plus Texas. But Bill is going to be joining us in Texas. And Bill, this is really cool. So we have two different conferences, two different sets of speakers. We have the Texas group, and then we have the California group. And this is going to be great. Can't wait to have you there. But is the alarm okay?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay.
That's the first, Tom.
Hey, all kinds of crazy things happen. So
it does. It does.
So I had this question come on last night, and I told everybody, look, travel to Israel is safe. Bill, you go there all the time. I go there a lot. You actually go there more than I do. I'm going there in October. I can't wait. But with that, people they see civil unrest. They say, hey, proselytizing is becoming an issue. And they're worried about Hezbollah, worried about Iran. Is it safe to travel to Israel? I tell people it is safe. And you don't go, there's certain things you aren't going to be involved in over there in that land. But Hezbollah is a real threat. Iran is a real threat. And Saudi Arabia is now pushing for divided land. So interesting dynamics. What are your thoughts on any of these things?
Well, it's interesting, Tom. I think part of the reason that the Saudis even showed any interest in normalization was a possible security agreement with the United States. They were concerned about Iran, the development of nuclear weapons. Some people believe that Israel's not the first target of the Shiite, but Saudi Arabia, the Sunni, the capital of the Sunnis. So this is what happened. Is it was kind of an attempt to see if the Biden White House, who doesn't seem extremely interested in the Middle East, and after the Afghan debacle and the promotion of a potential Iran nuclear deal, So there was kind of a carrot, but Prince Salman and his father and foreign minister have emphasized no normalization without a Palestinian state. They kind of test it, but the bottom line here is the leaders of Saudi Arabia pretty much have said, we'll test the waters, but no deal unless we have a Palestinian state. What's also happened, Tom, you and I have watched China become a bigger player. They have worked out an agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and to kind of mend some of their differences. And I might even go back to July of 2021 when we had Biden go to the Middle East. Actually, July 2022, I think that was the trip. His purpose of that trip was to beg the Saudis for more oil after the Russian-Ukraine invasion. So, he went to Israel and met with the Saudis, and within 48 hours of Biden leaving Saudi Arabia in July 2022, the Emirates, United Arab Emirates, and the Saudis reopened their embassies in Tehran. And boy, what a start. And then 72 hours after Biden left Saudi Arabia, Erdogan from Turkey and Putin were in Tehran meeting with Khamenei and the president of Iran. And then fast forward up to early this year, the Chinese have become the broker in the Middle East between the Iranian and Saudi differences. They're just taking a much bigger role. They already have a $40 billion oil contract with Iran. They already are, I think at this point, close to being the largest purchaser of Saudi oil. And they're very smart, clever, strategic, just like the Persians, just like the Iranians. So Israel's, this is a real formidable force when you look at Iran developing weapons of mass destruction, bent on wiping out the Zionist state. Iran continues to fund Islamic Jihad. They're the big money behind them, and they operate in Gaza and also fund Hezbollah. So with all that said, Tom, the neighborhood is getting more and more dangerous, and it kind of gets back to the attitude when Obama was in office. The enemies of Obama did not fear him, and the allies could not trust him. And I think it's pretty much the same situation again with Biden, especially after the debacle in Afghanistan.
Yeah, with the Biden administration, it's just awful. Nobody can trust him or trust anybody in his entire administration. So we're looking at what's happening in the government, I think is just absolutely terrible. It's an awful thing to see. It looks like a planned destruction of America. And at the same time, when you look at what's taking place with Israel, what we are racing toward in Israel is the fulfillment of Zechariah chapter 12, where the whole world is going to be against Israel. Because it seems like with Israel, what's happening is not just that America is abandoning Israel. It seems like America is in the strange place of cursing Israel, which is frightening. You've already talked a little bit about some of the events like hurricanes and so forth, but when you look at the greater whole of America, and at the same time, while I would say we're cursing Israel, it's no surprise that we're in this place and experiencing all the different things that we are.
That'd be very interesting, Tom. I think that the Biden administration has more animosity toward the Netanyahu government than any other presidency. Maybe similar to Obama, there was a lot of animosity there. And as you alluded earlier, they're going to be doing certain things to apply more pressure on Israel. The big thing is a judicial reform. Finally, today, Biden's agreed after 7 months to meet with Netanyahu. And part of that is to apply more pressure on this judicial reform that's necessary in Israel. And I think the other thing is additional pressure. They are supplying funds now to the Palestinians. I think they're reopening the Palestinian office in Washington, D.C. They're sending money to the Palestinians. They are doing what they can behind the scenes with the Arab countries to apply more pressure on Israel to try to make peace. And, Trump, the consequence came from two things: is the Peace to Prosperity Plan and Abraham Accord. but he never forced Israel to do anything they didn't want to do or try to use financial or military leverage in order for him, Netanyahu, the Israeli government, to cooperate. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I mean, Biden's slipping. I mean, that's just the bottom line. The man is slipping more and more personally while he's in office. But I don't, this does not bode, based on my eye-to-eye writings and documentation over the years, if the Biden administration continues this, only God knows how that's going to play out. There's been record-setting hurricanes, Hurricane Ian last year when Biden was at the United Nations calling on Israel to do 2 states. He also pressured Lapid to say that Israel's favored 2 states. That's when Hurricane Ian formed and then came ashore, as they were talking about at the national security level. They had another massive hurricane when Naftali Bennett was in the White House when he was prime minister. And so we're going to continue to see these events. They'll be either political and or atmospheric, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. Again, the greater the pressure in Israel, the greater the corresponding event and consequence. So I think, Tom, only God knows how this is going to play out. But if the Biden administration is empowered, along with the international community, who has also recently said, the EU representative for the Middle East says there's no such thing as an area A, B, and C. It's all Palestine. So I don't know what's going to happen, Tom, but it's not trending in the right direction for those that are going to come against the covenant land.
Listen, yeah, it's not going to go well. Jesus is going to come back and he's going to settle the whole matter once and for all. But man, there are so many different things that are all heading this particular direction. From the SDG summit meeting coming here in September to the Red Heifer. I want to ask you about the Red Heifer here in just a second, your thoughts on it. But real quick, everyone, listen, if you would subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, and also hit the notifications, whether on the app or on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. If you set your alert on so you can get the notifications when we're going to go live or when we have a video that we think you guys will want to see. And it also helps to be able to get the word out. So subscribe, share, and set the alerts. And also, as I mentioned earlier, coming up in Texas, we have San Marcos in California coming up this weekend. And then we're going to be in Texas in about 5 weeks. Bill Koenig is going to be joining me, John Haller, along with Dr. Andy Woods, Olivier Melnick. I got to think of everybody that's going to be there. I'm drawing blanks on the rest of the names. Maybe somebody will help me out here with the rest of the names, but it's going to be absolutely terrific. And you can join us for live stream too, just by looking at the app or going to the app or on the website, hopeforourtimes.com. Okay. Big question, Bill. A lot of people, I'm opinionated on this, but I'm curious as to your opinions on it. The Red Heifer, there's more and more news about it that is coming out. Your thoughts on it? I know I think it's Numbers chapter 19, that the ashes of a red heifer were necessary for the cleansing of temple instruments. Your thoughts on this as we see it more and more in the news while all these other things are converging?
Well, it's certainly fascinating. I was there on the ranch in December 20th, 2021, when our late friend Ray Bentley was there with Robert Maweri, Byron Stinson, and others, and they selected candidates. And then last year, they sent 5 red heifers. Byron Stinson from this Texas area, just south of Fort Worth, Granbury. He's in Glen Rose, just south of Granbury. And they sent 5 heifers, perfect red heifers, over to Israel. They only need 1 for the ashes. 4, as you said, Numbers 19. That's what's necessary. So far, so good. I talked to Byron recently. The cows are doing well. They're on a farm in Israel. And, what they've had a couple over the last 25 years, if they develop even a white hair or any kind of blemish at all, they're disqualified. So that's what they're hoping and praying for, that one of these red heifers will be the ashes for the eventual construction of the third temple. So, very interesting. I think it's right around 2 years old. The calf has to be 2 years old before they can be sacrificed to obtain the ashes. So We're watching it, Tom. It's very interesting timing with everything else that you've covered today and we've covered. This is just maybe another one of those interesting indicators.
It's interesting. And here's one of the challenges I have, Bill, with the whole talk of the red heifer. This red heifer, whenever it comes about, if this is part of the plan, will be used in this temple that AntiChrist is going to sit in and demand to be worshiped as God. And, Bill, you and I both have a good friend over there, Sammy, and first time I met with him, we were having lunch in Jerusalem. He invited me to meet with him, and he said, everything was going good, and he goes, you know what? He goes, I have a problem with you prophecy people. And he was very real. And you'll understand this. You know Sammy really well. Sammy, by the way, everybody is a Jewish believer. But he said, you guys know that what's coming upon my people is going to be absolutely horrific. And sometimes it really bothers me when you say certain things with joy. And so I explained to him, I said, listen, our joy is in Jesus Christ. And I understand that these are warnings that we give out. And the warnings are that people will come to know Christ. And I know ultimately there's going to be a great outpouring of salvation that's going to come upon the Jewish people. But that's a real concern. And when you look at things like the red heifer, you start realizing this plays into this temple that Antichrist will sit in and demand to be worshiped as God. You put it in that perspective, we should take these things more as a warning and a call to salvation and repentance and surrendering to Christ.
Absolutely. And we have to, and I think, Tom, you do a good job, and I think that we're pretty effective to it, trying to just put this is what the Bible says. This is what the Bible is talking about. These are the final days. And my Jewish friends, I emphasize that a lot of what I'm quoting is their prophets, their Jewish prophets. And then when I walk them through some things, they start seeing it. I even had a couple correspondents at the White House when I was there that were Orthodox. And when something in the Middle East would happen, they would come to me and says, where's this in the Tanakh or the Old Testament? And I say, well, look at Daniel 9, or look at Isaiah 17:1, or look at Joel 3:2. And then I'd explain it. So I really try to emphasize this is what the Word of God says. The fact that you're back in the land, dispersed all over the world and back in the land. So I try to take it to a high road, even Zechariah 12:10, when they will recognize who they have pierced. And that's powerful. Or even in Romans 11, 26, 28, 20, when you talk about all Israel shall be saved. And there's mysteries. We don't know all the interpretation of these, but nonetheless, I try to, like I'm sure, Tom, the same thing you do is leave them with hope.
Amen.
Hope. I mean, you're still the Jewish people are still the centrality of the Bible from the beginning, still chosen. We've been grafted in, and we're talking about the most important city, according to Zechariah 12. Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone, and anybody attempts to move it. And you talk about the significance of Jerusalem. You talk about the significance of Israel. And another thing, Tom, we're blessed because we're a small percentage of the church that understands Genesis to Revelation is the Word of God. And 27% of our Bible's prophecy. So that's what's so important, Tom, is just trying to emphasize, because those are horrific when you talk about those horrible end times for the nation of Israel. They're tough, but at the same time, hopeful and prayerful that many people will come to know the truth in Yeshua.
Amen. I love how you put that. There's a small percentage of believers that understand the book from Genesis all the way to Revelation. It's a very small percentage. I've tried to tell people that before. Listen, in the Christian world in America, there's not a lot of people that like to talk about the second coming of Christ and to be reminded of the prophecies. For us, it brings great joy because we know what it points to. But for them, I guess it's the end of worldly dreams or something, I guess.
Yeah, we have a website, reach1billion.com.
Oh, yeah.
Reach1billion.com. We have 100 million Americans that attend church that have no understanding of the biblical significance of the days we live in. And that's 65% of the U.S. church, and that's 1 billion worldwide that do not understand anything about what we've been talking about today. But we're so blessed that we do fully understand.
Reach 1billion.com.
Right.
That is great. I remember you bringing that up with me once before. In fact, I'm going to put it on. I'm going to pull it up right now while you're on here.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you this question. It came up last night, and I've already seen it twice here today. It's regarding the missionary, the anti-proselytizing protests that have been going on. But before I ask you that, I remembered who the other person is speaking in Texas with us, besides myself. It's Alex Newman. So, Alex will be just absolutely terrific. So I'm looking at this thinking it's going to be great. Okay, so with this, this out of Times of Israel, and it's come in different forms. I've gotten videos too. Christians worry growing protest against missionaries will soon turn bloody. As we see this, you said before we even came on, this really shouldn't be a surprise as we see everything culminating toward the second coming of Christ. Can you explain what your thoughts are on that?
Well, Tom, we're living in a time that you and I probably, and well as your audience, never thought we'd live in a time like this. I don't think we would ever even begin to comprehend some of the craziness and some of the things that are happening within our country and world. It's just like a spirit of deception that's taking place. And I think that when you see, it's like a spirit building, an AntiChrist spirit. You've talked about that before, the AntiChrist spirit. And I think that's part of the deception that's so prevalent, not only in our country, but especially in countries like Europe that has such a small Christian base, and parts of the Middle East. And to see Orthodox Jews and some other Jewish people look for someone to attack because of their faith is sad. Because I tell you, Israel has no better friend than the Christians that love the country, love the people. I talk to people all the time, have for many years, as well as you, Tom. Evangelicals are deeply appreciated in Israel and by the Jewish community, because if they didn't have us, they'd be standing alone. And I think that's what we have to do to emphasize and to counter this, that we're seeing more and more. It's not too serious yet, but it's building, where Christians are going to be targeted, Jewish believers, or even just Christians, evangelicals. So I think that's just the emphasis of Israel's best friend are the Christians that love the state of Israel and understand the biblical significance of the state of Israel and the Jewish people.
Yeah. And, there's a misconception here when we look at things from America. You start seeing things like this in the news, because it's been all over the news lately, or at least internet news, I should say, is the thought is all the Jews hate all the evangelicals. That's not it. You get a small handful of particular beliefs over there with some religious people, and they're the ones who are causing those problems. It's a very small number. And,
right.
I tell people all the time, Bill, you go over there, I find out that it's the Palestinians, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, almost all of them really want to get along. They're not part of these radical groups and or this radical thinking. And it's understanding that. And one of the best ways we can support Israel is by visiting Israel, and instead of backing out. And often what happens, people say, well, I'm not going to go, or I'm going to do my own private protest against those Jews. Well, then it messes up everything. It's just the opposite of what we should be doing. And it's one way we can support the nation of Israel. I got this question on here from Wade Whitaker. And by the way, I just went on reach1billion.com. That's really cool, everybody. You just check out this website from Bill, the Abrahamic Covenant. This is right on the front page. Jewish prophets spoke of the Messiah. Jewish prophets spoke of the final days. The Messiah is coming. Boy, all these different questions I could ask you about that are right on there. Save that for maybe the Texas conference or something. Wade Whitaker said, we hear the world is bad. It's worse than bad. It's totally godless and blasphemous. We hear it's going to get worse. How could it get any worse? I don't understand. So Wade apparently hears it's exceptionally bad, but people that teach Bible prophecy say, hey, it's going to get worse. I mean, imagine what's going to happen after the restrainer is removed, the church is removed, the rapture takes place. Wow. I look at this, Bill, and I think, man, things are going to go exceptionally bad at that point.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. I think I've been doing this for such a long time, and I think at one time we'd have 3 or 4 major things in play at the same time. Now almost every one of the final day markers are in play and accelerating. It's like building and building. I think that when you look at first of all, I appreciate that we have the handbook, the biblical handbook with the prophecy that gives us things to watch and to prepare ourselves and to prepare family. And I think the other thing that's important at a time like this is pray for those in your family that are not saved. Pray for those that are friends that you work with. Pray for opportunities to share the gospel. We need to stay active or occupied till he comes. And that's by, God gave us these signs, not only for self-protection, but I think in preparation in the sharing of the gospel. I think it's so important. And that kind of keeps things in proper perspective because the times are negative. I mean, this news can wear you down. Even a seasoned watchman can have moments like, yuck, enough. I've seen enough. It's tiring at times. I even fasted from the news for 5 weeks late last year and early this year. And that's the best thing I've done in 26 years. It was so good. It was healthy. And I think sometimes we have to be careful because I've even noticed traveling out of the country recently, looking back at just the Fox News website and going, God, look at this. Look at story after story after story. You cannot be optimistic and when you're reading this kind of negativity, one article after another, it's crazy. And they pull you in with these articles and the way they frame them. I think we need to be very careful where we're putting our time in terms of where we're getting our news. And most important, we need to be in that word. God speaks to us through the word. We need to spend more time in it. And then for our fun is to start following prophecy, where we're headed, how close we are. So with all that said, Tom, I mean, these are tough times, even for us watchmen. But nonetheless, keeping things in proper perspective because the Bible says, as in the days of Noah and Lot, and we are certainly in that period of time right now. In the beginning, and even beyond the beginning, we're in the middle of it.
We are, and I can't help but think that Bill, just as you said, without the word, I'd be a mess. There's just no way. The deception is going to increase, and you look at the news every day. It's just all this bad news. But if we stick to the word, we go, oh, wait a minute. Hey, this has a great ending, and in the meantime, Jesus is with me. And guess what? He has a place prepared for me. He's going to strengthen me. My faith is getting stronger and stronger. Wow, even in the midst of all this, I get to have great joy, and I get the opportunity to even tell other people about Jesus because they're scared, and I have the answers, and they see that I'm not afraid. They think, well, how is it that you have joy in this time? How is it that, what do you mean you have the answers? Well, yeah, the answers are all right here in this book. Let me show you. Just like you said with some of your Jewish friends, you've shown them, well, let's go to your Hebrew prophets and see what they have to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they see that joy, like you said, Tom, you see that joy. How could you have a joy in a time like this? Well, that's a great opening to start speaking of Jesus.
Amen.
And sure, it's an incredible opportunity.
Amen. Corey asked this interesting question. Corey asked, couldn't the Antichrist do away with World Economic Forum and World Health Organization, for example, and then come in as having all the answers and deceive that way? I've presented that theory before and said absolutely, because I mean, there's so much pushback against these radical globalists right now. I mean, people all over are waking up. Not just conservatives. There's people on the left that are going, hey, this thing's a mess. And if this is a reason to stay in the Word, because the deception will only increase. And I think, Bill, if someone came along and all of a sudden Bill Gates was arrested and all these, the Faucis and all these other people started getting thrown in jail for the deception, the great things that they have done, that person that was in charge of that would be hailed as this great hero. Everybody would be flocking to him.
But what's interesting is the World Economic Forum is probably the only good thing about COVID. It exposed it took back the curtain. So we're seeing what was being planned behind the scenes. Two things. One, the Antichrist will use the World Economic Forum in infrastructure, digital passports, digital currencies, International Monetary Fund, major banking systems, 130 so plus central banks, probably more than that, but the significant ones. And he'll either use them and their infrastructure or replace them with something very similar to their infrastructure. And the mark will be a significant thing. It's like, the social scores in China, that whole Chinese social scoring system, the facial recognitions. Nathan Jones, our friend, did a great teaching on that recently. And, people coming off a train and every one of them the facial recognition was so good, it had a plus 5, minus 10, plus 5 on every face coming off that train.
Yeah.
If they don't like what you're saying about the government, they just shut you off, and you can only spend your currency in drugstores or grocery stores. They can just shut you off, shut your money off. And that's been the concern about the Fed coin, Federal Reserve coin, or some of these digital coins, is just shutting you off. And if they shut you off, you comply or you're shut off. And I think that's definitely where we're headed. And the facial recognition is extraordinarily effective and good. We're seeing it used for passports and global entry and other things right now. And I think, with that, Tom, this is leading to the mark of the beast. You take the mark or you don't eat. Take the mark or you're tossed out of your house. Who knows? But that's where we're moving towards this electronic chip insert.
It is.
And we see the apparatus, the tech apparatus that's in place now that can make that possible really quick.
Yeah. And, you don't even have to imagine it anymore. We see it played out, experimented with, from Amazon to China to things going on here. You mentioned global entry. If you're traveling, it's here. So we don't have to imagine, could they shut us down, make it where you can't buy or sell unless you receive the mark? Well, you don't have to guess. It's all here. Hey, Bill, here's this question. Steve Townsend says, do you think the heavenly language will be Hebrew when we are in eternity with Christ? What do you think?
Good question. Good question. I very possible, but I don't know for sure. It's very interesting.
I look at that and I would think the same thing. I've been practicing Hebrew for a long time, so I kind of hope so. So I have a one-up on some people, but I don't know. Bill, thank you very much for joining me today. Tomorrow, Britt Gillette is going to be joining me, everyone. And also, don't forget, live stream San Marcos. You can register for the live stream. In fact, if you've already registered for the live stream for San Marcos, or if you are going to, if you do, you're going to get an email with this going to be totally cool, a coupon for the Texas conference. It's going to be, you'll get both conferences for an incredible price that we've been able to work out. So we're excited about that. We're excited San Marcos is sold out. Texas is like almost sold out in person. And Bill's going to be there, Alex Newman, and all the rest that I already mentioned, Dr. Andy Woods and several others, all in Texas. Both conferences, really exciting times we live in. Thank you, Bill, for joining me today. I can't wait to see you in person in your home state coming up in just a few weeks.
Thank you, Tom. Great to be with you.